We finally made it to the end of Tales from the Pizzaplex Book 6. We've done a summary for Nexi, we've done a summary for Drowning, we've done a summary for the Mimic, and now we're doing a summary for the Epilogue. Make sure if you haven't already that you go check out the summaries for each of those stories, but with all of them done, the Epilogue is all that's left for the book. Epilogues 4 and 5 are kind of boring because they were kind of just more of the same, so will Epilogue 6 follow the same route? Well, it's time to find out. The epilogue begins with something that surprised me quite a bit. I've been quite suspicious of Kelly based on information from the past few epilogues, but one of the main reasons was that Kelly was the only character in all of the epilogues, excluding Nick, who already died anyway, who we did not see the perspective of. This is very suspicious, but surprisingly we actually do see her perspective at the beginning of Epilogue 6, extremely dulling my suspicions of her. After working on it for a while, Kelly had finally managed to fix the radio, hearing the word help come from the other side. The voice was no longer lost in static like it was before, however it was the same voice that they'd heard before, saying that they were trapped in the old pizzeria. The last time they'd listened to this voice, they got attacked by the Mimic. Kelly and Lucia were sure that the voice was the Mimic again. Lucia came over with a notebook that she'd found in the drawer where they'd found the radio parts, and in the notebook, Lucia could vaguely make out some information. The Mimic was not only able to fit into any costume, but when Fazbear Entertainment created the line of Mimic endoskeletons, they didn't want to have to program all of the routines and such, so they made them use programming that allowed the Mimic to watch and learn. Essentially what this means is that after Edwin destroyed the Mimic, Fazbear Entertainment decided to use the very same concept and make a line of these endoskeletons. The Mimic in these epilogues, though, is the same one that Edwin made, hence the aggressive behavior and the replaced head since Edwin destroyed the Mimic's head, as I talked about in yesterday's Mimic summary. The mimicking behavior was apparently done in ways that weren't intended, prompting Fazbear to shut down the remaining ones, likely leaving the Mimic that was still inside Edwin's factory until Fazbear brought it over pretty recently. They guessed that maybe the Mimic had witnessed a hide-and-seek game and trickery, and since it's a robot, it couldn't fathom the fact that the trick wouldn't work more than once. The voice claimed they were in the janitor's closet, which they knew was void of any people, so they figured that since it was luring them there, it would be there, which they could use to their advantage. They knew where it was. Then they questioned the theory when they heard movement in the vent. They panicked, believing it was the Mimic, and moving the barricade they'd made blocking the door so that they could get out if it was. However, they soon realized that it was just Jace. They asked him where Adrian was, but his face said it all. Lucia didn't want to accept the answer, obviously due to the crush that Kelly had figured out a long time ago, and when she finally did, she went to straight, pure anger, yelling at Jace to tell them what happened. He explained the situation with the fan that they'd found and with Joel and Wade's body and how Adrian died. Jace claimed that they were the only three left and that he would probably be next. No one responded to that. When Jace heard the voice on the radio, he explained an idea that he heard on his way back through the vents. The vents weren't extremely stable, meaning that if the Mimic had crawled through, it would probably break through the vent and collapse through. All they had to do was have Jace lured into a room where he could slip through the vents, have Lucia and Kelly block the door behind it, and either trap it in there or have it fall through the collapsing vent. They decided that was their best shot, so they replied to the voice on the radio telling it they were coming, but that one of them was hurt and that they may take a while. The voice replied saying thank you. Kelly indicated to Lucia that she should apologize to Jace, and she did. But cutting back to Lucia's perspective, it's flat out stated that she was not sorry. She was angry at Jace for allowing Adrian to die despite his repeating words that there was nothing he could do. She would rather have had Jace die than Adrian, but right now she didn't have time to dwell on her feelings. They discussed the plan further for a while, talking about which room they would trap the Mimic in, one that had boxes blocking a decently small vent that they weren't even sure the Mimic could contract enough to get into. But even if it did, it would likely break through the vent anyway. They decided to set up all the tables and stuff that they would barricade the door with after deadbolting it near the door so it would be readily available. However, then Kelly spoke into the mic and told the quote-unquote trapped person that they were now on the way, but they didn't respond. It seemed that the Mimic had caught on, but that didn't matter. Trapping it was their best bet, and that's what they would do. We cut now to Jace's perspective, who reflects on his intense feelings for Lucia. When he found out she'd agreed to the double date with her, Adrian, and Hope, he thought that it could be the start of their future together, but he knew now that on the off chance they survived, they had no future together. Jace wanted to be the bait because he didn't think the bait would live for long. As they walked through the pizzeria, they heard a faint click sound. They stopped briefly, but when they continued, Jace noticed the black lockers he'd leaned against earlier. However, he felt like one of them wasn't closed earlier. That locker twitched and then opened as the room went dark. Kelly and Jace ran, but they weren't able to check if Lucia ran too. Kelly and Jace ran, Kelly closing every open door they passed, and they could hear the sounds of the mimic's movement and steps, but Jace heard the crunch of wood, a slap, and a slithering sound. He had to get back to go help Lucia, but Kelly wouldn't let him go, and luckily he heard Lucia make it back to them. However, she was missing a chunk of her hair and her scalp was torn, streaking blood down her head. Near a party room, they hunkered down behind endoskeleton parts as the footsteps of the mimic could be heard. Those footsteps were beyond the lobby, and the dining room lights flickered and went out. Switching back to Lucia, she didn't know how long they were hiding there for, but they were all breathing pretty loudly, and she wondered if the mimic could hear their breathing. She didn't know how well its hearing and sight was. It seemed to be currently in a mouse costume and was now heading towards the front hallway in the direction of the office and parts and service room. And Lucia wondered if it thought that they were hiding there, or if maybe it was just getting a new costume. After waiting a bit longer, they began searching for stuff that they could use to block the mimic. They grabbed some tables and stuff and headed towards the room they planned to trap the mimic in. As we switched to Jace's perspective, they propped the tabletop against the wall next to the storeroom. Lucia offered to be the bait instead of Jace, but he wasn't going to chicken out now. He would do it. Everything was in place now. It was all on Jace now. He told them to go, but then stopped them, grabbing Lucia and kissing her. The kiss lasted several seconds and Lucia didn't pull away. She was pretty shocked. Then Jace told them to actually go, and they did. That was Jace's first kiss, but would it be his last? Let's find out. After Lucia and Kelly left, Jace hurried to the storage room. In there were a bunch of mechanical-looking plush toys, one of which had red pigtails and big green eyes that almost seemed like they were staring right at Jace. It was creepy. Setting the toys aside, he looked around for the vent he'd seen earlier on his way back, and found it quickly. Once he got ready to head into the vent, he yelled, "Ouch, stop that, you stepped on my foot," which was obviously a lie. He was just trying to get the mimic's attention to get it to come in here. Then he grabbed the edge of the table outside the door and banged it against the wall. After a few minutes of making noise, he finally heard the mimic's footsteps heading in this direction. He saw the mimic in a cat costume heading for him. Jace rushed into the room, slamming the door behind him, and dropped to his knees next to the vent to listen. The door opened, the lights shut off, and Jace hopped into the vent before the mimic could get to him. Now all he had to do was keep crawling as fast as he could. However, every step the mimic took caused both the floor and the vents to shake, making it difficult for Jace to crawl very fast. The seams in the vents became more and more loose with each thud, and Jace's shirt sleeve got caught on a rivet that held the ducts together, loosening it and causing this section of the duct to disconnect from the next. Jace began falling backward towards the storage room. He tried to stay away from it, but something cold gripped his ankle as he was pulled into the storage room and his legs were torn from his body. Jace screamed, but not for long. We cut back to the perspective of Lucia, who, along with Kelly, had moved the tables into place. They were successful, but Jace was still in there, and with all the noises they'd been hearing, they couldn't tell if he was getting away. They assumed that if he made it, he would be heading back to the office. The girls began stepping in the direction of the office right as they heard the piercing screams of Jace, which rippled through their ears before they suddenly stopped, and they fell into each other, holding each other in horror. And that marks the end of not only the 6 Tales from the Pizzaplex epilogue, but also Nexi as a whole. What did you guys think of the epilogue? What did you think of the book? To me, it just seems like the epilogues are just kind of repetitive, as they do pretty much the same things over and over again, but maybe you have a different opinion. To me, the Mimic is the only story in this book that was really amazing, but again, your opinion may differ. But I hope you guys enjoyed this video. If you did, then make sure to leave a like and subscribe if you want to, and I will see you all in the next video. Bye, guys!